Colours That Blind, Chapter 38. Teacher Edwards brought the car to a halt in front of the clinic. An older nurse watched us before hurrying over. "Where's Nurse Edwards? She'll need to take a look at..." Teacher Edwards said, stepping out of the truck before the nurse interrupted him. "You'll need to leave immediately, Mr. Edwards. You'll need to follow her. Oh, it's all so terrible, so very terrible. You must go at once." "What's happened? Slow down, Mary. Tell me what's happened." "It's Tawana." My heart stood still. In that same moment, I caught sight of the nurse's face as the distraction of my injuries slammed her over the head. "Oh heavens, child, what's happened to you? Have the comrades done this too?" she asked, causing Teacher Edwards to look at me again, as though the broken flesh was a new thing he was seeing. "What happened to Tawana, please?" I struggled to say. "It's all so terrible. Some village boys found him left in a wheelbarrow in front of his house with a note nailed through his ear. I think it was the comrades. I don't know, Mr. Edwards." "Where's Nurse Edwards now?" "She left just a few minutes ago when the boys came. She took Nurse Brenda with her." "Left for where? Tawana's quarters?" Yes. Mr. Edwards, you must follow them immediately so you can bring him with the truck. Nurse Edwards didn't look too good either. She cannot wheel a grown man back, just her and Nurse Brenda. I still have patients in the clinic." By the time she finished speaking, Teacher Edwards was already back in the car. I had instinctively rushed back in too. "Should she be going with you? Should I not take a look at that?" the nurse said, her expression puzzled. Teacher Edwards looked at me, perhaps considering whether or not to instruct me to stay. I'm sure it was the look on my face that sent it all away. He revved the car madly as he reversed from where he had parked and turned quickly towards Tawana's quarters. Tawana's house was not far from the clinic, but as I flinched from the sight of his battered body, I understood why the nurse had insisted Teacher Edwards go with the car. I looked down when I saw him, ashamed that my little tattered jaw and my swollen eye had moved me to such agony. There lay a man, every inch of his body painted with bruising and swelling, so bad that I had to remind myself that indeed he was a man, a living one, we all hoped. As soon as we walked in, Nurse Edwards rushed to her husband and then stared at me in horror when she saw my face. "What have they done to her? Why won't this war end, Patrick?" She sobbed in his arms as though it were up to him. "It's all so bad, Patrick, really, really bad." She kept repeating before she pulled herself together and returned to Tawana's side. "What happened to him?" I think I must have whispered because it seemed no one heard me. In that moment, watching Tawana as he lay there with only his chest slightly moving, what played most in my mind was how he had always hated to keep still. I remembered how he had caused my grief so that she was always running after him and telling him to sit down when he was young and staying with us after his father died. But now he lay there, bound by stillness, almost as though he were a corpse. Nurse Edwards sat at his side, stitching his arm. I watched it all, drinking in the horror of it. The piercing and looping of the needle as it went in and out of his skin, the constant and gentle dabs from another nurse, whom I guessed must be Nurse Brenda, carefully tending to the other wrecked side of the man's body. I winced, although I doubt he felt any of the stings of that needle. I imagine it was the kind of pain that the body is overwhelmed by and can't process because it is everywhere. "What happened?" I whispered again, louder this time. "We suspect that they sent for him last night." Nurse Edwards paused for a moment, pulling the needle towards her and gently securing the stitch on Tawana's skin. "They must have told him they had a message for him to take to us at the mission, the note we found on him." My eyes followed hers to Tawana's ear, which had a dark hole punched in the middle. "The note said the comrades needed to eat. They said disallowing the boys to take food from the storeroom was a bad idea," she said, handing a piece of paper to Teacher Edwards. "Patrick, what are we going to do? Surely you're not still thinking of meeting them tomorrow? They're going to kill you." She wiped her eyes with the hand that didn't hold the needle. Teacher Edwards moved behind her and pressed her shoulder. "Nothing is going to happen, Emma. Don't worry yourself." We all looked at him, and although he tried to look firm and sure of what he had just said, he did not sound convinced. "You're meeting the comrades?" My voice was tiny, picturing the horror of what had happened to Tawana, picturing the pain I felt whipped up and multiplied. Teacher Edwards was quiet for a while. "They've sent for me," he said softly, as though he was afraid anyone else might hear. "We've spent days thinking of it, wondering what they could want. I wasn't afraid before, but now." He looked at Tawana, his brow twisting. "Anyway, I'm to meet with them tomorrow. I don't know when exactly or where. All they did was leave a note for me at the clinic a few days ago." First it was the children, now Tawana. This war isn't ending anytime soon, and to be honest, I'm not sure I want to see how it ends. "I've seen enough," Nurse Brenda said, wringing bloody water from the rag she was using into a small dish. I realised I recognised her as the weary older woman I had seen briefly at the clinic the other day, and she wore the same look today, tired, angry, bitter. "We have to leave this place. We can't continue on like this." "We can't just leave, Brenda. How can you even suggest it?" Nurse Edwards intervened. I stood in the middle of whatever windstorm was unfolding, watching them and somehow convinced that I was responsible for it all. How could I not be when my brother was there fighting with the comrades and I was carrying cauldrons at night to feed them? "Tell me though, Emma, what exactly are we still achieving here? You said it yourself. The comrades might kill Patrick if he goes to meet them, and will they not kill him, or worst of all us, if he doesn't?" Silence screamed. She went on. "I honestly think that at this point, all we're doing is endangering lives, including our own. How can we help anyone if we're dead? Look at Tawana lying there almost dead, and he's one of theirs. What do you think they'll do to us?" Nurse Edwards sighed, looking at her quiet husband, then back at Tawana. The needle between her fingers paused, and I could see the slight tremble of her hand as fear crept through her. "Besides, you cannot just think of yourself." Nurse Brenda's voice rose a little higher as her finger pointed at Nurse Edwards' bulging belly. "Remember when we came, Brenda, when they told us of this little village deep in Rhodesia where the Lord's work had to be done?" Nurse Edwards started, her voice calmer than her trembling hands, now resuming her stitching. "Remember the commitment we made when we left in England? We are still bound by that. We came here for the people, and I believe this with all my heart, that we have really become a part of them and them a part of us. They still need a school, they still need a clinic, and God help us, but I think we must stay to continue providing those." "A part of them? Have you lost your mind? We aren't a part of them." I looked down. "Open your eyes, Emma. We're only here because they need us for medicine and books. We're not a part of them." "And so what if that's the only reason? Heavens, have you already forgotten? Does the commitment we made to help everyone who needs help, regardless of who they are, not matter anymore? I hate the killing too. I hate the death, Brenda, of course I do. God knows I hate it as much as you do. But we are here to heal, and we will do that as best as we can, even if that's the only reason we're here." "I'm sorry, Emma, but we have done our part. I've done my part. More than what was required of us, if you ask me. If there's still work to be done, then let someone else come and finish it. If this is how you feel, then Patrick can speak to headquarters in London and arrange for you to go back home, but we're staying. Our work is not finished." She looked at Teacher Edwards, who stood there like I did, quiet, with his hand over his mouth and his brow slightly furrowed in thought. "With that kind of talk, you're only inviting death, I tell you," she said, before wringing into a bucket nearby the bloody water from the rag that she had been using to wipe Tawana. A quiet whistle from the wind floated in and brought a chill to her words. I thought of the day at the boss's veranda, and I looked at Teacher Edwards. If it came to it, did he believe enough to die for this? Did she?